I'd like to talk to you about a serious subject that I encountered here recently. As you can probably gather by the name of my YouTube channel, Widower's Adventures, that I've become a widower. My wife passed away in May of this year, and I would like to talk about regular funerals versus cremation. Me and my wife discussed thoroughly for years whether we wanted to be buried or whether we wanted to be cremated. After giving it lots of thought, we both decided that cremation would be a better alternative for us because we just didn't see the fact of having to pay the extra expense of having the burial and the traditional funeral. So, as the time came near for her passing, my daughter-in-law started looking into cremation and pricing for me. What we discovered is when you go on Google search and search cremations, there are a lot of companies that come up with different pricing, different formats. So we started researching and looking into it more specifically because there was such a price difference in what we were seeing. A prime example is I lost my sister in April, so while I was at her funeral, I discussed with the funeral director what their charges were for direct cremation. No funeral, just get the body, take it, cremate it, and supply me with the ashes. They wanted $5,000 to do a direct cremation. So after doing the research online, we realized that we could get a direct cremation from multiple companies in the Houston area for anywhere from $900 to $1,500. So we did a little bit more research and found out that they were all accredited. And I ended up going with a company called Cremations Direct. It was a very simple process. All I had to do was call them up. They took information from me over the phone. And this all transpired very quickly. I found out when we had went to hospice that my wife would not survive more than 24 or 48 hours. So I was making phone calls the morning before she passed and got a hold of Cremations Direct. They asked me for some basic information, her date of birth, how old she was, full name, social security number, how much she weighed, and told me at that point all I needed to do was give the phone number of their company to the representatives at the hospice facility, and when she passed, they would come and pick her up, and then they would notify me and do the rest of the paperwork. Well, she died 24 hours later, and that's exactly what happened. They called, they came and picked her up. About 3 or 4 hours after they picked her up the next day, they called me to let me know that they had her in their possession, and we went ahead and filled out some additional paperwork over the phone. Then they emailed me the paperwork for me to get my signature on and for me to pay, and I sent the paperwork back and the process was begun. I paid roughly under $900 for the cremation and 10 death certificates. Then they asked me if I wanted their basic urn, which was a plastic container, or if I wanted to provide my own. And I asked that I provide my own, which I was able to go on the internet, go to several companies, pick the company that I chose, and picked out a solid wood urn And whenever the cremation was completed, I took the urn that I purchased to them. They transferred the ashes from their container into this container and gave it to me. So my suggestion would be, if this is something that would interest you, talk it over thoroughly with your spouse or your loved one to make sure that they're okay with cremation. Secondly, what we ended up doing was having the direct cremation and then having a separate service, a celebration of life. We had the celebration of life about 3 weeks after she passed, and I rented a Knights of Columbus hall, which cost approximately $375. My daughter-in-law and my friends helped me put together a beautiful ceremony with a picture montage. We had several of the songs that she loved and appreciated. We had the minister come and give a few words, and then all three of our sons and myself got up and spoke a little bit, and that was it. And amazingly, I had tons of people come up to me afterwards and say that it was a fantastic service. They really appreciated the fact of how it was put on, and they thought it was much better than having the traditional funeral. I also realized that in the process of doing a traditional funeral, the person dies. Then it's usually 4 to 5 days before you have a viewing of the body, and then you have the whole funeral process the next day with the burial. I felt like this way, by being able to go through the initial grieving process with me and my family and some friends, where we actually got together, we had some food, and got through the initial grieving, that it was easier for us to come back in 3 weeks after we had time to sit and think and plan and put on a good memorial service. I just wanted to let this information out to you all because I thought it was important to let you know that there are alternatives. You don't have to spend $7,000, $10,000, $14,000 for a traditional funeral. Me and my wife has also discussed that multiple funerals that we went through. I lost my mother at 7. I've lost my dad when I was in my 40s. The last thing we always remembered was that funeral with that coffin sitting up there with them laying inside that coffin. I don't have those memories of my wife. The memories of my wife was her, of course, dying, but she was in a bed. She was surrounded by me and her 2 best friends, and that's the memory that I have. So feel free to hit me up on my Facebook, my comments below, anything like that if you have any additional questions, and God bless you.